Good afternoon to you viewers. This is the Colonel speaking to you live from the Grange for British Imperial YouTube Broadcasting. Now today we have one of the Columbia Graphophone International Educational Society records. This one is Lecture 10 Parts 1 and 2, The Speaking of Verse by John Drinkwater, whom you may recall was the Oxfordshire poet. Right, I'll just change the needle there. I should have done that earlier, but had other things to get on with today. Here we go. Right. Here we go. I'll change halfway through.
The speaking of verse. The poets of early ages are said to have made a practice of speaking or chanting their verses in public. The establishment and spread of printing saw a decline of the custom, and in modern times very little has been heard, until quite recently, of verse speaking as a serious accomplishment. It is true that even within living memory there flourished a race of men and women known as elocutionists. But their purpose was not to speak fine verse beautifully, but to use jingling and usually insignificant rhymes for the purpose of exploiting their own talents of declamation and mimicry on a platform. They not only spoke such verse as was within their very limited artistic sensibility, they also acted it, grimaced it, and belabored it. The attention of an audience was claimed by the reciter, not by the verse that he recited, which, considering the kind of verse that it usually was, meant no great loss. Recently, however, a number of people, several of the poets among them, have been attempting to make the public speaking of admirable poetry once again an accepted art. We need not pause to justify the definition. Piano or violin playing are accepted as arts in common speech, so that we may dignify verse speaking by the same term. Already, chiefly under the encouragement of the great musical festivals in Great Britain, the attempt has made considerable progress. But it has had to encounter a peculiar difficulty. It is an art in the practice of which there is no surviving tradition, and the people who have been engaged in the work have had to invent or recreate a tradition for themselves. This is a serious handicap. Any art that becomes enslaved by a tradition is in a bad way until someone rescues it. But an art that is unsupported by any tradition at all is hampered at every turn until it acquires one. If you are learning to sing, different masters may recommend different methods, but it may be said that on the whole they will agree as to general principles and as to the effect that is to be desired. In verse speaking, there is at present no such agreement, and while it may be claimed that we are moving forward, we are doing so with great uncertainty as to the direction that we want to take. The following observations are not made dogmatically. They are merely the result of an experience, limited indeed, but extending now over several years, and derived from a fairly wide range of opportunity. Let me dismiss at once and in a word the two questions of voice production and diction. A good voice is a gift of nature, and we have to accept our luck. Sometimes, whether it be naturally fine or not, a voice may be helped by sound teaching. But many of the best voices that I know have had no such assistance. As to diction, while there are certain sounds that must in any case be offensive, die for day, for example, I think we should be careful of condemning speech that does not happen to be precisely like our own. If someone gives a color to his diction that was used by his father and his grandfathers before him, I do not know what authority we have for correcting him. Speech is often debased, but we should distinguish between debasement and idiomatic pronunciation, if we may use that phrase. I will say no more on these matters.
Right, viewers, let's go over to the other side. I do not mean channel 4. Here we go. Right.
The first necessary thing is to consider the texture of this poetry of which we are speaking. Crudely, and in general terms, we may say that it consists of words set in formal rhythms. Words in the current use of daily life grow dull. The image is slowly rubbed away from them, as from a much-used penny. In order to repair this attrition, we find ourselves using all kinds of conversational inflections in order to reinforce our meaning. Sometimes even the inflection does more than the word. If on a sunny morning I say to you, "It's a nice day, isn't it?" you will hardly know what I mean. I shall really say, "It's a nice day, isn't it?" and you will understand. The inflection has given life to those overworked and impoverished words. So much so that if I use the inflection only, you will get nearer to my meaning than if I use the words without it. If I say, "It's a nice day, isn't it?" you are almost at a loss. But if I say, "Did-dee-dee, did-dee-dee," you may think I've taken leave of my senses, but you will gather at least that I'm feeling that it is a nice day. But the poet does not use dead words. He uses live words, or he is no poet. And his words are his only material. We have then to hear them very attentively, or we shall miss the life of his poetry. He relies upon our alert ears. That is the foundation of the compact between us. He has his own ideas about emphasis, and these ideas are perfectly embodied in his rhythms, which means that if we faithfully follow the rhythm of good verse, and with the exception of rare and intricate measures, this is a thing that almost any child can do, we give always the correct emphasis to the words. And if we emphasize any word that is not emphasized by the demands of the rhythm, we spoil the beauty of the verse and are further guilty of the impertinence of suggesting that the poet has not been able to make himself quite clear and that it is up to us to help him out. In short, let us get rid of all conversational inflections in our verse speaking. I sometimes think that never blows so red the rose as where some buried Caesar bled. I take those lines not merely for their poetical value, but because while they are poetry, they start on a note that might easily be used in conversation. And then we should speak it thus. I sometimes think that never blows so red the rose as where some buried Caesar bled. And the poetry vanishes. I sometimes think that never blows so red the rose as where some buried Caesar bled, that every hyacinth the garden wears dropped in its lap from some once lovely head. The theorist is on dangerous ground when he proceeds to demonstration. I do not claim that this is as the line should be read, but at least the method respects the poet's intention. Let us try another passage. Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thou thy worldly task hast done, home art gone and ta'en thy wages. Golden lads and girls all must, as chimney sweepers, come to dust. And now conversationally. Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thou thy worldly task hast done, home art gone and ta'en thy wages. Golden lads and girls, all must as chimney sweepers come to dust. And again, the poetry has gone.
Well, there we are, viewers. What a curious way of looking at things. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you and goodbye.